Just as the Empire advanced with complete confidence, a single human ship appeared out of nowhere. Unprepared and overwhelmed, the Empire faced a force it never expected. The question everyone asked was, why did humans send just one ship? Want to see more epic human victories that stunned the galaxy? Subscribe now and never miss an incredible story. The edge of Imperial space was silent when the human ship appeared. It did not arrive with the thunder of hyperspace storms or the flash of multiple jump signatures. It simply emerged, calm and precise, as if it had always been there. Imperial sensors immediately focused on it. Officers leaned closer to their displays, waiting for the rest of the fleet to follow, but nothing came. Only one small human vessel drifted forward, alone against the vast defensive line of the Empire. At first, the bridge crews laughed. Some thought it was a scout that had jumped too far ahead. Others assumed a navigation error. The Empire had faced many species before, and none of them would dare challenge Imperial territory with a single ship. The idea felt insulting, almost childish. Alarms did not sound. Weapons were not armed, because no one believed this lone arrival deserved that level of attention. The ship itself looked unimpressive by Imperial standards. Its hull was dark and smooth, lacking bright insignias or intimidating designs. There were no visible gun ports, no massive engines, no signs of heavy armor. To the Empire, it looked outdated and fragile, like a relic sent by mistake. Commanders joked that the humans had finally learned fear and were sending a surrender courier. Still, protocol demanded observation. Long-range scans were initiated. Data flowed across the screens. Energy output was stable. Shields were active but not aggressive. There was no buildup of weapons charge. Everything about the ship suggested restraint, not weakness. But restraint confused the Empire more than open hostility ever could. Messages were sent across Imperial command channels, asking how humans could be so careless, so foolish, or so arrogant. Analysts reviewed previous encounters with humanity. They remembered how humans fought with persistence rather than elegance, how they adapted quickly, how they refused to follow expected patterns. Even so, the conclusion remained the same. One ship could not matter. Numbers always decided wars, and the Empire had numbers beyond counting. As the human ship continued its slow advance, it did not change course or speed. It did not react to the Empire's scanning beams or warning signals. It moved with confidence, not haste, not hesitation. This calm movement unsettled some officers, because it did not match the behavior of a vessel that knew it was outmatched. The Emperor himself was informed, and even he questioned the report. One ship made no sense, unless it was a symbol, or a message, or something the Empire had failed to understand. He ordered continued observation and no engagement, curious to see what humans believed they were proving. Across the Imperial fleet, crews watched the lone ship grow slightly larger on their displays. Whispers spread. Jokes slowly faded. Silence replaced laughter, because the longer the ship advanced without fear, the more uncomfortable it became. Fear usually announced itself loudly, but confidence arrived quietly. Some officers began to notice small anomalies. Nothing alarming, just strange timing delays in sensor updates, tiny inconsistencies in distance calculations. Engineers dismissed them as routine errors caused by deep space interference. Yet, those errors all pointed toward the same source, the human ship. The Empire had expected a fleet to announce war, banners, signals, demands, threats, but instead they received presence, a single undeniable fact floating in their territory. Humans had not asked permission. They had not explained themselves. They had simply arrived. By the end of the observation cycle, one truth became impossible to ignore. Humans had sent only one ship because they wanted the Empire to see it clearly, to focus on it, to underestimate it, to laugh at it, and to watch it closely. Because whatever followed would not come from numbers, but from understanding. And so the Empire waited, staring at the lone human vessel, unaware that the moment it dismissed that arrival as meaningless, history had already shifted, quietly, without warning, just like the ship itself. Imperial communication arrays activated as the lone human ship crossed the outer boundary. Official channels opened with sharp precision. The Empire demanded identification, purpose, and immediate withdrawal. The message was layered with authority and threat, backed by centuries of dominance. Officers expected panic, excuses, or silence from the human vessel. Instead, the reply arrived slowly, deliberately, as if timing itself was part of the answer. The signal carried no distortion, no emotional markers, no rush. A calm human voice spoke in clear galactic standard, stating only identification of the ship and confirmation that it had entered Imperial space intentionally. Nothing more, nothing less. The bridge of the Imperial flagship grew tense. Commanders waited for surrender terms or negotiations. But the human message continued with unexpected restraint. The voice explained that the ship had been sent alone by decision, not accident, and that its presence was meant to be observed, not feared. The simplicity of the words unsettled the listeners. Imperial diplomats immediately responded, demanding clarification. They asked why a single ship would approach the Empire without escort, without protection, without visible strength. The human reply came again after a pause, stating that escorts were unnecessary, and strength did not always need to be visible. That answer spread rapidly across command levels. Some officers laughed, calling it arrogance. Others felt irritation, believing humans were attempting psychological games. Yet beneath the reactions, unease began to form. No species ever spoke to the Empire this way, not with insults, not with threats, but with quiet certainty. The human voice returned once more, responding to repeated demands for intent. It stated that the ship carried no demands and issued no warnings. It was there to represent humanity's position, and that position was stability through restraint. The Empire struggled to interpret this message. Restraint was not a concept they respected. Power was shown through force, through overwhelming presence, through fear. Imperial analysts dissected every word, tone, and pause. They found no aggression, no deception markers, no stress indicators. The calm was genuine, and that made it dangerous. A frightened enemy could be predicted. An angry enemy could be countered, but a calm enemy standing alone inside Imperial space defied logic. The Emperor authorized a direct channel, a rare gesture. His voice echoed through the chamber as he questioned the human representative personally, asking if humanity understood the risk they were taking. The response was immediate. This time, the human replied that the risk was understood, calculated, and accepted long before the ship was launched. That statement struck harder than any threat because it implied preparation beyond the visible moment. It suggested that humans had already considered every possible Imperial reaction and still chose this path. The Empire had always relied on uncertainty to maintain control, but here, uncertainty belonged to them instead. As the exchange continued, the human responses remained short and composed, refusing to escalate, refusing to retreat, refusing to explain more than necessary. They did not ask for peace. They did not challenge authority. They simply existed within Imperial space, calm and unmoving. Across the fleets, officers listened to the dialogue replayed in real time. The absence of emotion was louder than shouting. Some began to feel that the humans were not trying to win an argument. They were waiting, allowing the Empire to reveal its own fear through overreaction. When the Empire finally issued an ultimatum, demanding withdrawal or destruction, the human reply came with the same measured tone, stating that the ship would not withdraw and that any hostile action would be acknowledged, not resisted. The phrase puzzled commanders, acknowledged but not resisted, felt meaningless. Yet, it carried an unsettling weight. Silence followed, not from the human side, but from the Empire. Command staff hesitated because destroying the ship now felt wrong, like striking a messenger who had not raised a weapon. The calm human replies had shifted the situation without force. By the end of the communication cycle, one fact had become clear to those paying attention. The humans did not send one ship to negotiate. They sent one ship to speak calmly where others shouted, to stand still where others charged, and to let the Empire hear its own confidence echo back as doubt. Imperial Command believed they finally understood the situation. After the strange calm of human communication, logic returned to the briefing halls. Numbers were reviewed, comparisons were made, and confidence slowly rebuilt. The Empire had faced confident enemies before, and confidence without power always collapsed. Strategists projected battle outcomes on massive displays, one human ship against thousands of Imperial vessels. The results never changed. The simulations ended the same way every time. Complete Imperial victory within minutes. Losses were marked as negligible. Morale rose as officers reassured one another that the humans were relying on illusion, not capability. The lone ship was labeled harmless. Its lack of visible weapons became proof of weakness rather than mystery. Analysts concluded it carried advanced communication tools and nothing more, perhaps a mobile command relay or propaganda platform. The idea that a single vessel could influence an entire Imperial fleet was dismissed as human exaggeration. Orders were passed down to lower fleets to maintain formation and avoid unnecessary escalation. Not because the Empire feared the ship, but because destroying it too quickly would deny them information. They wanted to study it, to expose the limits of human technology, and to show the galaxy how easily confidence could be crushed by overwhelming force. Laughter returned to command decks. Officers joked about placing bets on how long the ship would last once weapons were armed. Some proposed capturing it intact and parading it through Imperial space as a warning. The earlier discomfort faded, replaced by familiar arrogance. The Empire had grown powerful by trusting patterns. Every species followed them. They built fleets to show strength. They shouted demands before attacking. They retreated when outnumbered. Humans were simply another variable that would eventually behave the same way. This belief allowed commanders to ignore subtle warnings hidden in the data. Small inconsistencies were noted, but quickly dismissed. Sensor readings fluctuated slightly when focused on the human ship. Timestamps failed to align perfectly, and long-range scans required repeated calibration. Engineers blamed software aging and deep space interference. No one believed such minor errors could matter. Imperial doctrine taught that danger announced itself clearly. Shields flared, weapons charged, fleets maneuvered. The human ship did none of these things. It remained steady, quiet, and predictable, so the Empire categorized it as a low-threat presence. This decision shaped everything that followed, because by assuming the ship was weak, the Empire stopped asking the right questions. They asked how to destroy it instead of why it was there. They asked how many weapons it carried instead of what it was affecting. Commanders failed to consider a possibility that did not fit Imperial thinking, that the ship was not designed to fight fleets, but to influence systems, not to overpower defenses, but to exist within them, unnoticed until it was too late. The Empire had always believed superiority meant visibility. The biggest fleets, the loudest power displays, the most dramatic victories, humans appeared to operate differently. But that difference was interpreted as inexperience rather than intent. As hours passed, the human ship continued to drift within Imperial space without interference. It neither advanced nor retreated. It simply remained, like a fixed point in a moving universe. Its presence became routine, background noise in a vast military machine. That normalization was the greatest miscalculation of all. Once something is accepted as harmless, it stops being watched carefully. Attention shifted elsewhere. Drills continued, fleets repositioned, and the lone ship faded from the center of focus. History would later record this moment as the Empire's turning point. Not because a weapon was fired, but because certainty replaced curiosity. The Empire believed it had solved the puzzle, and in doing so, it stopped looking for the answer. By the time doubt returned, it would no longer be possible to pretend the human ship was insignificant. But at this moment, surrounded by charts, numbers, and assumptions, the Empire felt safe, convinced that one ship could never change the balance of power, and that belief sealed their mistake. As the lone human ship continued its steady approach, small but noticeable anomalies began appearing across Imperial systems. It started with minor sensor delays. Reports from distant fleets arrived a few seconds later than expected, minor enough to dismiss at first. But then other systems began showing subtle inconsistencies. Navigation computers reported conflicting positions for the same ship, and targeting arrays struggled to maintain locks on stationary objects. Imperial engineers scrambled to diagnose the cause. Deep space interference, cosmic radiation, software glitches, every plausible explanation was considered, yet the problems persisted, growing in number and severity. Communications between command ships experienced unpredictable lag. Transmissions repeated themselves or arrived in scrambled segments, confusing even the most experienced operators. Some officers laughed nervously, believing it was just minor technical issues, that the vastness of space could create strange readings. But the laughter faded as the anomalies began affecting weapon systems, calibration tools, and even the automated maintenance drones. Small failures compounded quickly into significant operational challenges. The Empire prided itself on precision, on control, on being able to calculate every variable in battle. Yet, these unexpected glitches undermined that confidence. Routines that had worked for centuries began to falter. Crew members grew uneasy as familiar displays failed to update correctly. Alarms blinked erratically, and autopilot systems drifted off course. Admirals convened emergency meetings. Theories were debated with intensity, yet no explanation satisfied all participants. The anomalies did not follow predictable patterns. They did not correspond to attacks, sabotage, or environmental hazards. It became increasingly clear that the human ship was not reacting aggressively, yet somehow it was the source of disruption. Scouts were sent to examine the vessel up close. Long-range scans failed to reveal any hidden emitters, no visible weapons, no technological signatures that could explain the disruption. The ship appeared entirely ordinary, yet ordinary could not account for the cascade of malfunctions occurring across the fleet. The Empire realized that their sensors, which had once been their greatest advantage, were now unreliable. Systems that predicted enemy movement and coordinated fleet maneuvers could no longer be trusted. For the first time, officers felt uncertainty creep into their decisions. Hesitation replaced confidence. In response, fleets slowed their advance, halting drills and maneuvers. Every action was calculated with caution. Each ship aware that even a minor misstep could be amplified by the mysterious influence of the human ship. The concept of a single ship creating widespread disruption challenged every doctrine the Empire had ever relied upon. Commanders tried to counter the anomalies with redundancy, activating backup arrays, deploying auxiliary ships to stabilize signals, but each solution only partially succeeded, and new inconsistencies appeared elsewhere. The influence seemed adaptive, as if it anticipated corrections before they were fully implemented. Whispers spread among crews. Stories of other odd occurrences circulated. Some claimed that time felt slightly altered near the human vessel, that events seemed out of sync, that calculations which had always been exact were now marginally wrong in ways impossible to explain scientifically. Fear began to replace amusement. Even the Emperor took notice. Demanding reports and assessments, the anomalies were no longer minor technical problems. They were strategic threats, a quiet but undeniable force reshaping the battlefield without firing a single shot. The calm human ship, unarmed and solitary, had become a source of chaos. By the end of the cycle, Imperial analysts admitted privately that no previous encounter had prepared them for this. A single human vessel had undermined centuries of experience, all their planning, all their certainty. It had done so not through weapons or numbers, but through control of the systems the Empire relied upon. The fleets, once confident in their numerical superiority, now hesitated, every commander aware that the apparent simplicity of the human ship masked a complexity beyond their comprehension. The Empire had been stunned not by aggression, but by the quiet, calculated disruption of one lone ship. And in that moment, the first seed of doubt took root across Imperial command, a small but growing recognition that perhaps humans did not fight the way others did, that power was not always visible, that sometimes a single ship was enough to challenge the mightiest empire in the galaxy. The human ship continued its steady drift, but its presence was no longer simply noticed. It was felt. Subtle changes began to ripple through the battlefield. The Empire's fleets experienced delays in coordination. Sensor readings fluctuated unpredictably, and even the most carefully planned maneuvers failed to line up as intended. Officers who relied on absolute certainty began to question everything they knew. Long-range scans, once trusted to provide perfect data, now produced conflicting information. Distances appeared shorter or longer depending on the viewing angle. Velocity calculations became inconsistent, and targeting systems misaligned by fractions of a degree. Small errors multiplied across the fleet, creating gaps in formation that were dangerous under normal circumstances. But with a single human ship present, the meaning of those gaps became terrifying. Engineers worked frantically to recalibrate the systems, but each adjustment seemed temporary, as if the human ship anticipated corrections and neutralized them effortlessly. No weapon fired, no shield deployed, yet control was slipping. The battlefield itself was being reshaped without a single aggressive act. Commanders began to notice patterns emerging, subtle but deliberate. that the anomalies were not random but controlled. The human ship influenced energy flows, communications, and even the perception of time across the fleet. It was as if it existed simultaneously in multiple calculations, making the Empire's usual predictive models useless. Orders were delayed, warnings were misread, fleets hesitated, unsure whether they were responding to actual threats or artifacts of the human ship's quiet interference. The Empire prided itself on precision, on predicting outcomes before they happened, but now uncertainty had replaced certainty. And hesitation spread like a virus through the command hierarchy. The ship's effects were not limited to systems, either. Morale began to waver. Crew members whispered about strange feelings of disorientation, about systems behaving as if guided by an unseen intelligence. Even veteran officers questioned the reliability of their own instruments. The sense of control they had taken for granted was slipping. The Emperor called a council of his top strategists, demanding explanations, yet no one could articulate the cause. Every hypothesis collapsed under scrutiny. Traditional military thinking failed. There were no conventional strategies that could counter what appeared to be a quiet, pervasive manipulation of the battlefield itself. Some suggested direct attack, but targeting systems failed to maintain a lock. Weapons misfired, or energy outputs dropped at critical moments. Attempts to isolate the human ship only magnified the effect, as if resisting made the disruption stronger. The Empire realized that force alone would not solve the problem, that traditional power was irrelevant. Across the fleets, every movement became tentative. Previously confident crews questioned whether they truly understood the environment. The human ship, unarmed and solitary, dictated the rhythm of operations, controlling the ebb and flow of activity without firing a shot, without issuing a command, without revealing its full capabilities. The more the Empire tried to dominate the battlefield, the more it revealed its vulnerability. Systems that had once been reliable now became unpredictable. The advantage of numbers faded because the humans had turned the Empire's own strength, its technology, its coordination, its precision, into uncertainty, a quiet, invisible weapon. Officers began documenting the anomalies, calling them disruptions, distortions, and eventually phenomena beyond explanation. Every explanation seemed to point back to the ship, but the ship remained silent, calm, unassuming, yet its influence was undeniable. A quiet authority commanding respect, fear, and disbelief simultaneously. Admirals convened emergency war councils, unable to create actionable strategies. Every plan fell apart under the weight of unexpected interference. The ship was not moving to attack, not maneuvering for advantage, but it had already gained it, reshaping the battlefield in ways the Empire could not perceive, let alone control. By the end of the observation period, one thing was certain. The human ship had rewritten the rules of engagement, showing that power was not measured by firepower alone, that presence, calculation, and understanding could dominate even the largest fleets, and that the Empire's greatest mistake was underestimating what it could not see. And as the lone ship continued to drift calmly through the Imperial fleet, a new understanding emerged among officers, that humans did not fight like others, that sometimes influence mattered more than force, and that a single ship could change the entire course of a battle without ever firing a single shot. The Empire's officers were still trying to comprehend how a single human ship could hold such power over their fleets. Analysts revisited every historical record of human behavior. Searching for a clue, they discovered a pattern that had been overlooked for centuries. Humans relied on efficiency, precision, and adaptability rather than overwhelming numbers. The realization was slow to settle, because it contradicted every assumption the Empire had ever held about strength. The ship's calm presence suddenly made sense in a new light. Humans did not need dozens of vessels because one was enough when it carried experience, intelligence, and autonomous decision-making. This was not bluff. It was strategy, perfected over generations. The Empire had assumed that dominance required mass. Humans proved that mastery of complexity outweighed quantity. Imperial engineers and tacticians examined the ship's design, its unassuming hull, its minimal visible weaponry. Yet every detail spoke of purpose. Sensors were finely tuned, engines were optimized for maneuverability, and control systems were layered with redundancy. It was a vessel built not for spectacle, but for efficiency, capable of performing tasks that the Empire could barely comprehend. As they studied the humans, officers began to see patterns in their past conflicts. Humans had always adapted, exploiting weaknesses rather than forcing frontal attacks, relying on ingenuity over numbers, improvisation over protocol, and patience over impulsiveness. This vessel embodied that philosophy, representing the culmination of centuries of learning, adaptation, and careful calculation. The idea that one ship could suffice unsettled the Imperial High Command because it invalidated all their assumptions about war and control. They had believed that size, coordination, and firepower were everything. But humans had demonstrated that careful design and understanding of systems could replace them entirely. One ship became a force multiplier beyond any calculation. Conversations across the fleets shifted from mockery to unease. Officers debated why the humans had not sent a fleet, and the answer was as simple as it was terrifying. They did not need to. One ship carried all the experience, intelligence, and capability required. The Empire had overestimated its own numerical advantage and underestimated the humans' mastery of subtlety. The Emperor convened a secret council to reassess strategy. Generals and admirals presented data, simulations, and historical case studies. Every presentation returned to the same conclusion. The human ship was enough because it represented a concentration of skill and insight. It carried more than just physical systems. It carried human ingenuity, adaptability, and resolve. Even psychological warfare was unnecessary because the ship's mere presence destabilized the Empire. Systems malfunctioned, crews hesitated, and commanders doubted. The Empire realized that humans had weaponized understanding itself, turning predictability into chaos and complacency into vulnerability, all without a single shot. Every fleet began to reevaluate its readiness. Officers recognized that humans always calculated risk carefully, sending only what was necessary to achieve a goal. Efficiency replaced brute force. Patience replaced impatience. Subtlety replaced spectacle. The lone ship was not a sign of weakness, but of supreme confidence and preparation. Imperial strategists ran simulations imagining what would happen if multiple human ships appeared. But the results confirmed the humans' wisdom. Numbers only diluted effectiveness. One ship allowed humans to control the situation with precision. Multiple ships would introduce coordination problems and reduce flexibility. The Empire realized that humanity had already solved problems they hadn't even imagined. Across the fleet, nervous respect replaced previous scorn. Officers began to whisper about the humans' ability to condense power, knowledge, and strategy into a single vessel. They understood that this was a lesson in mastery, that humans had learned to extract maximum effect from minimal resources, turning simplicity into strength. By the end of the observation, it was clear that the Empire had underestimated not just technology, but intelligence and foresight. One human ship was enough because it was not a ship alone. It was a culmination of human capability, a living representation of efficiency, strategy, and adaptability. And the Empire's shock came not from what the ship could fire, but from what it represented. And as the ship continued its calm course through Imperial space, a new understanding settled across officers, generals, and strategists. Humans did not need many ships to make a statement. One was enough when mastery of systems, people, and strategy replaced mere numbers. The Empire's fleets had reached a point where hesitation replaced certainty. Every maneuver became tentative, every order second-guessed. The lone human ship had disrupted systems, communication, and morale without firing a single shot. And now the commanders faced a choice they had never imagined: to engage recklessly and risk further disruption, or to pause and reassess. As the fleets held position, officers discussed the consequences of any action. Simulations showed that even minor aggression could escalate unpredictably. Weapon systems that had always responded flawlessly now faltered. Targeting arrays misaligned, navigation grids shifted slightly, and every attempted correction seemed anticipated by an unseen hand. The realization that the human ship dictated the flow of battle without moving shocked everyone. Across command decks, tensions spread like wildfire. Some officers wanted to strike immediately, to assert dominance and prove that one ship could not intimidate an empire, while others argued for caution, pointing out the anomalies in every system. The failures that had started as small errors now affected fleet coordination and operational reliability. Even a single miscalculated attack could cascade into disaster. The Emperor, observing from his command bridge, demanded updates, yet even he felt unease. Centuries of experience and confidence could not prepare him for a situation in which power was expressed without force. The human vessel had reshaped the battlefield not through aggression, but through presence, calculation, and control over variables the Empire had always taken for granted. Admirals debated for hours, weighing honor, protocol, and tactical advantage. Every plan to attack the ship revealed flaws that had never existed before. Strategies that relied on overwhelming numbers now seemed insufficient. The advantage of the Empire's size had been neutralized by a single silent vessel. And the realization was terrifying. Gradually, a consensus formed, not because officers accepted defeat, but because they recognized the danger of miscalculation. The Empire had never before encountered an enemy who could dominate so completely without conventional force. They concluded that advancing recklessly would be folly, and that retreat, at least temporary, was the wisest course. Orders were issued to slow formations, to hold positions, and to withdraw units from the forward edge of engagement. It was not a surrender. It was a strategic pause, a recognition that the Empire's assumptions no longer held true, that technology, numbers, and protocol could be countered in ways they had not anticipated. As fleets repositioned, officers watched the lone human ship drift steadily through the same space, untouched, unaffected by their attempts to test or provoke it. It remained calm, unhurried, like a fixed point in a moving universe. Its presence was a reminder of the vulnerability of even the mightiest empire, and that respect could be demanded without a single laser fired. The withdrawal spread unease across the ranks. Crews whispered about the anomaly that had forced a retreat. The human ship's quiet power became a legend in real time, a demonstration that intelligence, preparation, and precision could outweigh overwhelming force. The Empire's reputation for invincibility faltered, replaced by cautious awe. Imperial analysts attempted to quantify what had happened, but no equations or simulations could fully capture the impact. A single vessel had dictated the tempo, the uncertainty, and the limits of Imperial operations. Lessons that would be studied for generations, as officers realized that control was not always visible and power was not always measured by firepower. By the time the fleets fully repositioned, the human ship had achieved what no other opponent ever had. It had forced the Empire to retreat without combat. It had turned confidence into hesitation, precision into doubt, and dominance into careful calculation, all through presence, intelligence, and subtle influence. The Empire had learned a lesson the hard way, that even the mightiest forces could be humbled by strategy, patience, and mastery, condensed into a single ship. And in the silent corridors of command, every officer understood that the humans had won the first, most important victory without ever raising a weapon. And as the Empire withdrew, stunned and silent, the lone human ship continued its steady course, unchallenged, unthreatened, proving that power could exist without aggression, and that sometimes restraint itself was the greatest form of dominance. By the time the Empire had fully repositioned its fleets, the consequences of the encounter with the lone human ship became unmistakable. Commanders and officers slowly realized that what had occurred was not a minor tactical anomaly. It was a lesson in strategy, patience, and human ingenuity. One ship had forced the greatest empire in the galaxy to pause, reconsider, and retreat. Imperial analysts worked tirelessly to document the events, creating reports, simulations, and assessments, yet no formula could capture the full impact. The ship had not fired a weapon, had not issued a threat, and yet it had controlled the entire engagement, dictating timing, movement, and morale without conventional force. Across fleets, whispers turned into serious discussion. Officers debated how one vessel could achieve such dominance. Some suggested advanced technology beyond comprehension. Others proposed a level of strategic mastery accumulated over centuries. But all agreed that the Empire had underestimated humanity's capacity for efficiency and control. The Emperor himself demanded briefings, and even he found explanations lacking. Every report circled back to a single truth. Humans did not fight like other species. They did not rely on overwhelming numbers. They relied on mastery, preparation, and precise execution. The lone ship was a perfect embodiment of these principles. Commanders reflected on how the Empire had been stunned, not because the humans were aggressive, but because they were confident, calm, and purposeful. The humans had sent one ship because one was enough. It carried intelligence, adaptability, and the ability to influence systems without a single laser fired. The concept was alien to Imperial thinking. Across the ranks, officers began to understand a new principle of warfare. That force alone was not the measure of power, that a single, well-prepared, and strategically placed unit could alter the course of entire campaigns. The human ship had demonstrated that mastery of systems, information, and timing outweighed sheer numerical advantage. The story of the encounter spread quickly through Imperial records, becoming an example taught to every new generation of officers. The lesson was clear. Humans do not need fleets to make an impact. They need precision, calculation, and understanding. And even the largest empire could be humbled by a single opponent who mastered these skills. As the fleets regrouped and moved back to safer positions, commanders felt both relief and unease. Relief because no destruction had occurred, and unease because they now understood the scale of what humans could accomplish with careful planning and focus. The Empire's dominance had been challenged in a way no one had anticipated, and that knowledge changed strategy permanently. The human ship, meanwhile, continued its course, seemingly indifferent to the disruption it had caused. Calm and precise, it had achieved its objective without confrontation, without alerting the Empire to its full capabilities, and without revealing that the lesson it had delivered would echo across the galaxy for decades. In Imperial academies, officers debated how the humans had managed to exert control without force, studying simulations of the event, analyzing every decision, every system anomaly, trying to replicate the approach. Yet the lesson remained that humans relied not on quantity, but on quality, and the subtle application of knowledge over raw aggression. By the end of the encounter, the Empire acknowledged that human philosophy and strategy were fundamentally different. One ship could embody centuries of experience, collective intelligence, and adaptive capability. It had changed perceptions of power, challenged assumptions of dominance, and left an indelible mark on the Imperial command. The lone ship became a symbol, not of aggression, but of what careful planning, focus, and confidence could achieve. The Empire had been stunned not by destruction, but by understanding, and the officers who witnessed it would carry that lesson into every campaign, every engagement, and every strategic decision thereafter. And as the human ship drifted beyond Imperial observation, quiet, steady, and unchallenged, the galaxy began to recognize that sometimes one is enough, that mastery outweighs mass, that patience outweighs haste, and that a single, perfectly executed action can reshape the fate of an empire, leaving the lesson clear. Humans do not send fleets to prove power. They send one ship when the outcome is already decided.